Welcome back, everybody, to the Octies Draft Talks channel. Today we have my 2023 NFL Mock Draft 3.0, my official pre-combine mock draft, and once the combine wraps up early next week, I'm going to have a post-combine mock draft as well. The combine process has already started with players arriving in Indianapolis, going through interviews and all that stuff. We already had a major bombshell early this morning with the Jalen Carter news, which I'll dive into a little bit deeper in a little bit. Tomorrow, I believe, officially starts the athletic testing, and that'll go through the next few days, and that's really when we're going to find out which players' stocks go up and which players' stocks go down. This mock draft will be 2 rounds, my first multi-round mock draft of the year, and it will have trades, so there will be a lot of moves up and down the draft board. This past weekend, I did a multi-person draft with my buddy Nick and Ader, so in case you missed that one here on the channel, I recommend you check it out. The next episode of our podcast will be up pretty soon, which you will find here on this channel. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Unsurprisingly, we have a trade here with the number 1 pick. The Chicago Bears have been rumored to wanting to move down here, and for obvious reason. There are a lot of good quarterbacks worthy of moving up for in this draft, and that's what the Indianapolis Colts are going to do, moving up to the number 1 pick to select Bryce Young out of Alabama. The official trade will be Indianapolis getting pick 1, while the Bears get picks 4 and 35, which is Indianapolis' second rounder, along with a first and third next year from the Colts. So the Bears are getting a king's ransom to move down 3 spots and inevitably draft the player at 4, who they would have at number 1 had they not moved up. But let's talk about Bryce Young to the Colts first. I'm not as convinced as I was a month or 2 ago that Bryce Young will be the first quarterback off the board. I believe they are doing measurements for the quarterbacks today, so I'm curious to see what Bryce Young's height and weight comes out to be. There's a chance that information may already be revealed by the time this video is uploaded, but as of the time I'm recording this, I do not have that information quite yet. Nonetheless, I think Bryce Young is going to be the best quarterback here for the Colts. I think he's the most talented quarterback in the class. And while there are some physical question marks in terms of his size, I mean, this is a guy who has been dynamic. He's been consistent over the last 2 years. And I think he will be able to start right away for Indianapolis and turn around their franchise. Now, I think there will be some teams who have guys like Stroud or Richardson or even Will Levis as the top quarterback on their board. But for the Colts, I think it'll be Bryce Young. With the second pick, the Houston Texans select C.J. Stroud, quarterback out of the Ohio State University. I really would not be surprised if Anthony Richardson is the second quarterback off the board, but I think the Texans need a guy who can truly fit their culture, who has a mental edge and a mental toughness to him, and I think C.J. Stroud displays that more than any of the top quarterbacks in this year's draft class. Just look at the Georgia game in the college football playoff, the biggest game of C.J. Stroud's career, and boy did he show up. Noah Ruggles, the kicker, did not exactly show up, but I think if he makes that kick, Ohio State are the national champions, and I think the dialogue around C.J. Stroud would be unfairly different because he was so good in that game and absolutely deserved to win it. But nonetheless, I think this is going to be a home run selection for the Texans. You get your franchise quarterback. Now, there are some question marks with C.J. Stroud and Houston because C.J. Stroud has the same agent that Deshaun Watson has. So maybe there's a shot that Watson or the agent talks C.J. Stroud out of going to Houston. But for now, I don't anticipate that happening, and I think C.J. Stroud winds up in H-Town. We have another trade with the 3rd overall pick. The Carolina Panthers are moving up to select their franchise quarterback, Anthony Richardson, out of the University of Florida. The official trade is that the Cardinals will get picks 9, 39, 93, along with a first rounder and a 7th rounder next year. Carolina will get picks 3 and 96. So both teams swap 3rd rounders. The Cardinals get Carolina's 2 this year, and they get a 1 next year, along with a future day 3 pick. The Anthony Richardson hype train has gone off the rails over the last week or so, and I'm personally buying stock. I am in. on Anthony Richardson. I mean, if you look at the physical tools, he's big, he's got a cannon of an arm, and he has a higher ceiling than any quarterback in this draft class. He's got a long ways to go in his development, and given this scenario, I hope Carolina signs a bridge quarterback. Maybe you keep Sam Darnold for another year. Maybe you sign a guy like a Jacoby Brissett or even a Tyrod Taylor. I think all of those are very solid options. Get a guy that Richardson can grow under and ultimately become the full-time starter probably next season. I know Carolina drafted Matt Corral last season, but I don't think Matt Corral is stopping you from getting Anthony Richardson here. With the 4th pick, the Chicago Bears select Jalen Carter, the defensive lineman out of Georgia. The dialogue around Jalen Carter is quite interesting right now. He arrived to Indianapolis for the Combine. He's done some interviews with some teams and was supposed to interview with the media today, but at around 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, there was a warrant put out for Jalen Carter's arrest. The night of January 15th, he engaged in reckless driving in Athens, Georgia, and there was another car that was involved as well. That car featured one of Jalen Carter's Georgia teammates along with another Georgia staffer. That car crashed, and unfortunately, Jalen Carter's teammate and the staffer passed away. So the issue with Jalen Carter right now is his involvement within that, and that's why they currently have a warrant out for him. Carter will apparently leave Indianapolis and return to Athens to try to get all of this cleared up, and that's currently where we are at now. Much of the details to this story are still developing, and we're going to probably find some more information out within the coming days and weeks. Obviously, there are bigger pieces to this story than the NFL draft. However, I'm not going to try to play lawyer and figure out what I think is going to happen with Jalen Carter. Rather, this is an NFL mock draft, and I'm going to try to figure out what this does with Jalen Carter's draft stock. As of now, I don't think his stock slips a lot, and I could be wrong about that, and if there are more details that come out later, that could sink his draft stock a little bit, but for now, I still have him going with the number 4 pick. I still think he's the pure best football player in this draft class, although this does make Todd McShay's report a couple of months ago about Jalen Carter having character concerns a lot more interesting. When Todd McShay said that at the time, everybody kind of brushed it off. There was no reason to believe that Jalen Carter had any character issues, and at that point, we had every right to give Carter the benefit of the doubt. Now, not so much. So, again, I'm going to wait to hear some of the follow-up details that are probably going to be coming soon before I really make any major judgments with him. With the 5th pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Tyree Wilson, edge rusher out of Texas Tech. Yes, I have Tyree Wilson going ahead of Will Anderson. No, I'm not being biased by having Will Anderson go to Detroit. I have actual reasoning here with Tyree Wilson going ahead. So I think there are going to be some teams who prefer the size, length, athleticism, and upside that Tyree Wilson brings to the table. Why was Trayvon Walker the number 1 pick over Aiden Hutchinson last year? Because of athleticism and upside, and a team over the last 10 years who has valued length, athleticism, and upside is the Seattle Seahawks, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. I think most teams would choose Will Anderson over Tyree Wilson, but I think there is some truth to Tyree Wilson possibly being the first edge rusher off the board, and I think a team with Seattle's drafting history could very well make this same move. So with that, the Lions are laughing all the way to the bank. They get Will Anderson at 6. This was the easiest pick of the entire mock draft. I don't think I have to talk about it too much, but I will say, if this does happen, I might throw a party because this would be an incredible value selection for the Lions, getting probably the 2nd best player in the draft with the 6th overall pick. At pick 7, we've got another trade, and it is a big one. The Las Vegas Raiders are trading for quarterback Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers. The Raiders will receive picks 78 along with Aaron Rodgers, while the Packers get picks 7, 38, which is the Raiders' 2nd rounder, and a 4th rounder next year. So Rodgers and a 3 are going for a 1st, 2nd, and 4th. I think that's a fair trade. I think Rodgers' trade value has kind of gone down over the last month or so, but I still think he's going to command a lot of value, and I think the Packers would be smart to move on. I think if the Packers keep Aaron Rodgers, it's just going to be a sinking ship. The title window is closed. they need to start a rebuild. As a Lions fan, I am hoping they keep Aaron Rodgers and both Rodgers and the Packers can sync together. I would not be surprised if that ends up happening. But for now, I do have the Raiders getting Aaron Rodgers, and the Packers here at 7 select Lucas Van Ness, the edge rusher out of Iowa. There weren't really many obvious picks here for Green Bay, so I had them reaching down the board a little bit. But I would not be surprised if Van Ness ends up in the top 10 at all. He's a little bit raw, but I think teams are going to like his upside. The Packers could look to add another pass rusher, even if they do extend Rashawn Gary, which they'd be pretty stupid not to. And then with the 8th pick, we've got another trade, our 4th trade within the top 8 picks. The Washington Commanders are moving up with the Atlanta Falcons to select quarterback Will Levis. So the details of this trade will be that the Commanders get picks 8 along with 226 in the 7th round, while Atlanta gets pick 16, 47, and a future second. So Washington's giving up quite a bit of assets to move up 8 spots and get their franchise quarterback in Will Levis, who has some of the physical tools that you really look for. He's been dealt a bad hand at Kentucky, but he was also not great this year. The Commanders did draft Sam Howell in the 5th round. I know they like him, and I like Sam Howell a lot as well. But I think given this opportunity, I could see Washington making a move up and acquiring their franchise quarterback in Will Levis. With the 9th pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of the University of Oregon. So the Cardinals moved down from 3 with Carolina. They got a 2nd rounder this year. They got a 1st rounder next year, along with this selection at 9 overall. I think Christian Gonzalez will be a great fit with the Cardinals defense. I think when it's all said and done, he will be my CB1 in this year's draft. He's got the size, length, and production that you look for at the cornerback position. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes even higher than this, but with how the quarterback board fell out and everybody going in the top 8, that leads to some players slipping quite a bit, including Christian Gonzalez. The Eagles with the 10th pick select Devin Witherspoon, cornerback out of Illinois. James Bradbury is a free agent. Darius Slay's not getting any younger, and I think the Eagles would like to add another piece to the secondary. I think Devin Witherspoon is a guy who can make an immediate impact right away. He can start opposite of Darius Slay, and you can keep Avonte Maddox in the slot. And I think this will be a really nice pick for Philadelphia, getting a tough, gritty corner to add to their secondary. With the 11th pick, the Tennessee Titans select Paris Johnson Jr., the offensive tackle out of the Ohio State University. Taylor Lewan has officially been cut. Here's your Taylor Lewan replacement. Pretty simple. With the 12th pick, we've got another trade, and it's kind of a small one, but it's an interesting one. The New England Patriots are going to be moving up 2 spots with the Houston Texans as they jump the New York Jets to select Peter Skoronski, the offensive tackle out of Northwestern. The Patriots will get picks 12 and 239, while the Texans get picks 14, 107, and 192. Houston gets the guy at 14. They would have picked at 12, while adding 2 solid day 3 selections. The Patriots draft Peter Skoronski. He is probably the highest floor offensive lineman in this draft, somebody who can start right away. He's going to be a really good guard if New England wants to go that route, but he can play tackle as well, and we've seen another former Northwestern offensive lineman with a similar build in Rashawn Slater do very well at offensive tackle, at least as a rookie. Obviously, last year Slater was hurt for most of the year, but Peter Skoronski has a similar build. He doesn't have super long arms, and he's not the natural build for an offensive tackle, but I think like Slater, Skoronski can absolutely handle it. So New England jumps the Jets, who kind of get screwed over here, but they'll settle for Broderick Jones instead, the offensive tackle out of Georgia. Jones has a little more physical upside than Skoronski. I don't think he'll be as good right away, but he does have a lot of overall potential, and I think he'd be a nice addition for the Jets' offensive line. The Texans at 14 select the top receiver off the board, Quentin Johnston out of TCU. I have no clue what Quentin Johnston's stock is. I could see him in the top 10. I could see him in the 2nd round. I think he's one of the biggest wild cards in this draft because he's got all the physical tools. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, he's athletic, but he doesn't really play big. So I think that could concern some teams, but he also has abilities that most big receivers don't have. His ability after the catch is really impressive. So I think if you can develop him, the ceiling is very, very high. And I think he would be an excellent weapon for C.J. Stroud's offense. With the 15th pick, the Green Bay Packers select Brian Branch, the versatile defensive back out of Alabama. Adrian Amos took a step back this year. He might be gone. Darnell Savage has struggled at safety, so they could use another versatile defensive back. I think Brian Branch would be a nice addition. You can put him in the nickel. You can put him at safety. You can use him in a variety of different ways. And I think he'd be a very nice addition for the Green Bay secondary. With the 16th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Will McDonald, the edge rusher out of Iowa State. McDonald's a fascinating player because he's very talented. The upside is there, but he was very poorly misused at Iowa State. I think he would have been an option for Atlanta at 8, but that feels a little bit too high, hence the trade down. I think the Falcons are going to look to add some more pass rush, and Will McDonald is a guy who could be very, very good if he is actually used right for once. With the 17th pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Joey Porter Jr., cornerback out of Penn State. Outside of decent athleticism, Joey Porter checks all the boxes. He's big, he's tough, he's physical. I think he's going to be a very good pro right away. And he gets drafted to the team where his father, Joey Porter, had many great seasons. With the 18th pick, the Detroit Lions select Deonte Banks, cornerback out of Maryland. This is a name that I don't think a lot of people know. And there are going to be some guys here towards the tail end of the first round who aren't really getting a lot of first round looks, but who I'm projecting could end up being first rounders. This includes Deonte Banks, who's 6'2", 205 pounds, good ball skills, very consistent in coverage. I think when it's all said and done, he will be a first-round pick, and he could challenge to be one of the first 3 or 4 corners off the board. So get used to the name, because this guy will consistently be in first-round mock drafts after the combine. I think Will Anderson and Deonte Banks would be a home run first round for the Lions. With the 19th pick, we've got another trade. The Dallas Cowboys are moving up with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Cowboys will get picks 19 and 232, while the Bucs get picks 26, 90, 129, and a future 4th. So Tampa Bay is not adding a first or second rounder, but instead they're taking in a quantity of draft picks as they look to recoup some mid-round selections and start their rebuild. As for the Cowboys, they are drafting Bijan Robinson, the running back out of Texas. Since January, this has been the player who I've had Dallas going with in the first round. I think when it's all said and done, Bijan will be on America's team. The Cowboys need running back more than people think. Ezekiel Elliott ain't cutting it anymore, and Tony Pollard, who's coming off a major leg injury, is a free agent. I don't think Dallas is going to pay Tony Pollard because they paid Ezekiel Elliott and it backfired. I don't think they're going to want to pay 2 running backs big money, especially with Pollard coming off a big injury. So I think Tony Pollard will be gone in the offseason, meaning Dallas could look to add another running back. And why not add the best running back prospect in the last 5 years with Bijan Robinson? This just has Jerry Jones written all over it. With the 20th pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Jordan Addison, wide receiver out of USC. Tyler Lockett's getting a little bit older. He's still a good player, but it doesn't hurt to add a long-term replacement. And for now, you've got a really good threesome, with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jordan Addison, who's arguably the best wide receiver in this draft class. We've got a run on receivers happening here as the Chargers at 21 select Jackson Smith-Njigba out of The Ohio State University. Keenan Allen could be a surprise cut candidate, and I think JSN would be the perfect replacement. He's somebody who can slide right into the slot. He knows how to get open. He's consistent. He's steady. He's reliable. And he's going to be able to produce right off the bat. I think this would be a perfect fit for the Chargers. Even if they do keep Keenan Allen, he can eventually be the long-term replacement. With the 22nd pick, the Baltimore Ravens select Zay Flowers, wide receiver out of Boston College. He's a little bit smaller, 5'10", around 175 pounds, but he's a dynamic piece whose stock has shot up over the last month or so since his impressive East-West Shrine Bowl. And the Ravens need receiver pretty badly. They got to get some more weapons for Lamar Jackson. I think the addition of Zay Flowers in that offense would be a big one. We have another trade here at pick 23. The New Orleans Saints are moving up. They'll be giving picks 29, 71, and 148 to the Minnesota Vikings to move up here to 23 to select Calijah Kancey, the defensive lineman out of Pitt. I'm curious to see where Kancey ends up because this is a guy who is highly productive this year, but he's a little bit undersized, 6 foot, 280 pounds. He's going to be a very good pass rusher right off the bat, but he does have a lot of questions in run defense. If he does become a good run defender, then he could become a total stud, and I think that could make it worth New Orleans moving up to get him. With the 24th pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Dalton Kincaid, the tight end out of Utah, arguably the best pure receiving tight end in this draft class. I think he can be a perfect replacement for Evan Engram if he ends up going. If Engram is back, then I don't think this would be the pick that Jacksonville makes. But I think as we saw last year, the tight end position is going to have a lot of value in this Jaguars offense going forward, particularly somebody who can be a great true receiver. And I think Dalton Kincaid's fit within that offense would be really nice. With the 25th pick, the New York Football Giants select Daiyan Henley, linebacker out of Washington State. You're probably asking yourself, who the hell is this? Because I don't think a lot of people have heard of this guy yet. But get used to the name. Another player who I think could surprise people with how high he ends up going. Henley was a graduate transfer from the University of Nevada. He had a very solid season at Washington State. 6'2", 230 pounds. He's got the size and the traits to be a very, very good player. He needs to be a little bit more consistent in coverage, but I think he's going to go a lot earlier than people expect. Possibly the first off-ball linebacker off the board, and possibly in the first round of this year's draft. With the 26th pick, we've got another surprise here as the Buccaneers go with Garrett Williams, cornerback out of Syracuse. This is another player who not a lot of people are talking about. So I think Garrett Williams will make a lot of sense with the Buccaneers defense. They're able to move down and get him here at 26. I think picking him at 19 would be a reach. But now you acquire multiple mid-round selections and you still get your guy here in the late first round. Williams is a very talented player, 6 foot, 190 pounds, very consistent in coverage, needs to be a little bit more physical, but I think with guys like Sean Murphy-Bunting and Jamel Dean probably gone, the Buccaneers could really use a guy like him in their secondary. With the 27th pick, the Bills select O'Cyrus Torrence, guard out of Florida. I've seen a lot of mock drafts of the Bills going running back, and I don't really get it. James Cook was pretty good last year, and I think with an increased role, he can be very solid. Along with that, there were some notable flaws on both sides of the ball that the Bills had this year, and they were exposed in the second round of the playoffs against the Bengals. The Bills really struggled within the trenches. Both their offensive line and defensive line were really bad, so why not get arguably the best interior offensive lineman in this draft of O'Cyrus Torrence, who you can plug right into guard. With the 28th pick, we've got a trade. The Cardinals, who moved down earlier, are now moving up. They'll be giving picks 34 and 66 to the Cincinnati Bengals in exchange for picks 28 and 131. The Bengals are a team who do not make a lot of moves during the draft, but there is a guy they like, but they think they can get him in the second round. So why not move down, add a third-round pick as the Cardinals go up and get Myles Murphy, the edge rusher out of Clemson. I think Murphy's going to go lower than people expect. Going into draft season, he's been getting legit top 5 to top 10 buzz. But I think that was sort of based on name value, and the same can be said for his Clemson teammate, Bryan Bresee. 2 5-star recruits who have the physical traits to be really good, but the production was not really there. And I think people have finally kind of started to realize, particularly with Bresee, but Murphy as well, that he may not be the slam dunk top 10 pick that a lot of people thought they would be coming out of high school. I still think Myles Murphy's worth a first round pick. This does not mean he has been a bad player at all with Clemson, but he's been a little bit disappointing the past couple of seasons, contrary to expectations. With the 29th pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Emmanuel Forbes, quarterback out of Mississippi State. So the Vikings move down. They get Forbes, who's a good athlete, very good ball skills, not as consistent as some of the other first-round corners, but I do think he's a pretty talented player, and Minnesota needs secondary in the worst way because their secondary was buns last year. With the 30th pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select B.J. Ojulari, the edge rusher out of LSU. I think we're going to start to see a run on edge rushers here, and Ojulari would be a good fit within their defense. It never hurts to add more pass rush, and you know Howie Roseman's going to use one of his 2 first-round picks on a pass rusher. With the 31st pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Dawand Jones, offensive tackle out of The Ohio State University. The fourth Buckeye in the first round is off the board. The Chiefs are going to need some help at offensive tackle. With Andrew Wiley, a free agent, he was their starter at right tackle. Lucas Niang has not been able to show he can consistently stay healthy. Orlando Brown, the left tackle, is a free agent, but I do think he'll be back and franchise tagged. Nonetheless, I think adding a guy like Jones, who has similar size and length to Orlando Brown in the sense that both of them are total freaks in that regard, I think Brown could be a good mentor for Dawand Jones. Jones is a lot more athletic than Orlando Brown, which doesn't really say a lot because I think I'm more athletic than Orlando Brown, and I'm sitting in my room making YouTube videos. So there you go. But nonetheless, Orlando Brown's a mammoth of a human being, and he's a very good player. And I think having Dawand Jones, being able to learn under him for a little bit, could be pretty good. We are not done yet. Don't forget, we've got a second round to go through. I'm going to try to go through these second round picks a little bit quicker than the first rounders. With the 32nd pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Nolan Smith, edge rusher out of Georgia. Smith is another guy who was a very highly regarded recruit coming out of high school. Things didn't entirely work out in college, although he did play well this year before getting injured. He doesn't really have the greatest size, 6'3", 235 pounds. He's very slender for an edge rusher, so he's got to gain some weight, which could hurt his explosiveness. But I trust a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers to know how to develop him. The Steelers have arguably one of, if not the best edge rushing duo in the league, with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, both of whom are fantastic players. But Highsmith is on the final year of his deal. Even if the Steelers do pay him, which I expect they will, it does not hurt to add more pass rushing depth. And I think Nolan Smith can be a great third piece to their pass rush. With the 33rd pick, the Houston Texans select Tuli Tuipulotu, edge rusher out of USC. He's a little bit of a tweener, 6'4", 290 pounds. He doesn't really have the strength to be an interior guy. I'm not sure if he's got the quickness to be an edge rusher, but the production is absolutely there. And that's not to say he isn't athletic. He is quite versatile, and I think the Texans can use him in a variety of different ways. He had 13 sacks this season and had a great year for the Trojans. Ogbania Okoronkwo is a free agent for the Texans. He's actually a pretty good player at edge. So even if they do bring him back, the Texans have so many needs to where Tuipulotu can still find himself on the field. With the 34th pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Luke Musgrave, tight end out of Oregon State. This is the player I would have had the Bengals pick in the first round, but they're able to move down with the Cardinals and still get their guy. Musgrave only played 2 games this year, but I think he's a very talented tight end, 6'6", 250 pounds. He's got great athleticism for his size. He's a little bit raw, needs to be more consistent, but the ceiling is 100% there, and if he develops, man, the Bengals offense just gets even scarier. The Chicago Bears acquired this pick from the Indianapolis Colts when they moved up for Bryce Young, and Chicago selects Darnell Wright, right tackle out of Tennessee. I think I'm a little bit higher on Wright stock than other people are. This is a very talented player, 6'6", 235 pounds. The Bears need offensive line in the worst way possible. They really need anything on offense to help out their quarterback, Justin Fields. So getting him another guy who can block for him is going to be important. With the 36th pick, the Los Angeles Rams select Steve Avila, guard out of TCU. The Rams are kind of entering a rebuild in a sense. I think they're still going to try to win games next year, but I think they should also look to get younger, and Avila can be a very solid day one starter at guard. With the 37th pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Joe Tippmann, center out of Wisconsin. I think a lot of people expect John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota to be the top center off the board. I think there's more upside with Tippmann, however. I think his athleticism and potential is really, really exciting. And again, look at a team like Seattle who values size, length, and athleticism. I think they're going to like Joe Tippmann a lot. The Green Bay Packers select Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame, one of the safest players in this draft. You're getting a very solid weapon for Jordan Love. A lot of people think Mayer could be the top tight end off the board. I think teams are really going to like the upside that Dalton Kincaid and Luke Musgrave bring to the table. But Mayer is a safe, solid pick. With the 39th pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Jahmyr Gibbs, running back out of Alabama. I think Gibbs is one of the most slept-on players in this draft class, and it's not that people don't know him, and everybody knows he's good, but he would be RB1 most years if not for Bijan Robinson. I think there's a real shot he ends up going in the back end of the first round. Maybe Dallas likes him if they can't get Bijan. Maybe the Bills, although again, I don't think they're going to pick a running back early. Maybe the Bengals. maybe the Eagles, hell, maybe Kansas City. There's a lot of teams who I think could look his way, but instead I had the Cardinals getting him here early in the second round, thanks to the trade they made earlier today with Carolina. I get the Cardinals are not a good team, and if you're a bad team, you shouldn't really pick a running back this early. But the talent is too much to pass up, and James Conner, I mean, he's fine. I think he's a good compliment for Jahmyr Gibbs, because Gibbs is more of your elusive receiving back, one of the best pass-catching backs in this class. And then you have Conner, who's your downhill, tough, physical, red zone runner. I think those two can be a really nice pairing together. And while the Cardinals are rebuilding, they're still going to try to win games. And adding a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs on your offense is going to help your team win games, because this guy is good. With the 40th pick, the New Orleans Saints select Kayshon Boutte, wide receiver out of LSU. This is kind of an interesting pick. I think Boutte is a little boomer bust. The upside is certainly there, although he hasn't really developed as hoped at LSU. There are some character concerns as well. He originally planned to stay at school, then he declared for the draft, and a lot of people think because of some issues he had at LSU, the school basically told him, declare for the draft because we're not letting you back. I think the New Orleans Saints are a team who's going to try to make a big swing here on draft night. They want to be aggressive. They want to get a guy who can be really good and potentially shake up their trajectory of their team, because right now the Saints appear to be on the downswing. Their championship window is shut. So why not take a big swing on a guy like Kayshon Boutte and hope it works out? Instead of swinging for a single, they're swinging for the fences. It might not work, but if it does, the rewards are going to be big. We've got a trade here at pick 41. The Kansas City Chiefs are moving up with the Tennessee Titans. The Titans will receive picks 63, 133, 217, and a second rounder next year. That is a lot for the Chiefs to move up 20 spots, and they'll be selecting Jalin Hyatt, the wide receiver out of Tennessee. Dear God, help us all. That's really all I can say about this pick. Jalin Hyatt on the Kansas City offense is frightening. The Chiefs have a number of receivers who are free agents this year. Mecole Hardman and Juju Smith-Schuster both could be gone. Other than Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I'm not sure if there's a set starter at wide receiver. They do have Kadarius Toney, who played well down the stretch. He was great in the Super Bowl. Sky Moore was also very good in the Super Bowl. But I think adding another true threat on the outside to complement Marquez Valdes-Scantling is going to be a necessity for the Chiefs in the offseason. They've had a lot of success with speedsters, so why not go and add another one? The Cleveland Browns select Bryan Bresee, defensive lineman out of Clemson. A lot of people think he's going to go earlier than this based off of name value, but Bresee has not been all that consistent during his Clemson career. He's missed a lot of games the last couple of years. As a sophomore, he tore his ACL, and he just hasn't really lived up to being the number one overall recruit in his high school class. Regardless, there are a lot of flashes, and there's real athletic upside with him, so somebody's going to want to take a swing at some point, and I have it being the Cleveland Browns here in the second round. The New York Jets had their second offensive lineman of the day with John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. Probably one of, if not my favorite names in this draft. I mean, John Michael Schmitz just flows off the tongue. That just sounds like a tough, physical guy you can put on your offensive line, and that's exactly true about him. He's one of the older prospects in this draft and will be 24 pretty soon, but you can slide him right into center, and he's going to be good for a while. With the 44th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Josh Downs, wide receiver out of North Carolina. He's not the biggest guy, but I think he can complement Drake London and Kyle Pitts within that offense. The Falcons have used 2 top 10 picks on receivers the last couple of years, and it still feels like they need another one, so they're going to add another big-time weapon for Desmond Ridder to throw to. With the 45th pick, the Green Bay Packers select Anton Harrison, tackle out of Oklahoma. Harrison's a talented player, but he's a little bit raw, which is fine because the Packers have David Bakhtiari, who's good when healthy, which with him has been inconsistently, but when he's on the field, he's damn good. Harrison can sit behind Bakhtiari for a little while and eventually become the long-term tackle. I think this would be a really good fit of team and player, and Harrison can ultimately become a long-term starter with the Packers. Then the Patriots select Keion White, edge rusher out of Georgia Tech. He's gotten a lot of first-round buzz, and for a little bit, I kind of bought into it. But the more I think about it, I just don't really see Keion White as a first-rounder. He's a little bit raw. He originally went to college to play tight end, ended up switching on the defensive line. He's a little bit of a tweener, 6'5", 286 pounds. And with being raw, he's already over 24 years old, which is really not ideal. Now, he has some athleticism and some traits that you just can't teach, so I understand why teams like him. But I don't know, I'm just not as high on him, and I think he could go a little bit later than all this hype is suggesting. With the 47th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Cam Smith out of South Carolina. He can be a perfect fit within the nickel. His stock, I feel like, has kind of slipped a little bit. Personally, I don't get it. I think he is a top at least 40 player in this draft class. So I think this will be a great pick for Atlanta. Maybe he doesn't have the upside to be a true outside corner, but in the nickel, I think he could be really, really good. With the 48th pick, the Detroit Lions select Jack Campbell, linebacker out of Iowa. This just feels like a Dan Campbell kneecap-biting type of pick and player. Jack Campbell's a tough, physical kid, and he's a great leader. I think that's what the Lions need within the middle of that defense because Alex Anzalone is a free agent. Even if he's brought back, I don't think you want him to be the long-term starter at middle linebacker. So you get Jack Campbell. This guy's not going to test off the charts at the combine. I don't think the ceiling with him is ridiculously high. He's not one of these freak linebackers like Devin White or Isaiah Simmons or this year Trenton Simpson who can run sideline to sideline like a running back. But I think Campbell's going to give some physicality and toughness to this defense, who's going to continue to look to add to their culture. With the 49th pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Drew Sanders, linebacker of Arkansas. Sanders is one of the most fascinating players in the entire draft to me. He was recruited as an athlete out of high school to Alabama. He played edge. Things didn't really work out. Transfers to Arkansas, plays off-ball linebacker, and gets a lot of sacks. I believe he had close to 10. This is a guy who specializes on linebacker blitzes, and the Steelers blitz their linebackers at a very high rate. So I think he's going to be a perfect fit to the defense. He's a little bit raw because he's new to the off-ball linebacker position, so he's got to improve in coverage. He's got to improve his run defense. But I trust a team like the Steelers to develop him, and I think he could be really, really good. Physically, there are some similarities in terms of play style to Micah Parsons. And if the Steelers use him similarly to how Dallas uses Parsons, then I'm just saying I don't think he's going to become Micah Parsons, but he could be really good. With the 50th pick, the Buccaneers select Nathaniel Tank Dell, wide receiver out of Houston. He's a small guy, but he is a playmaker with the ball in his hands. You can use him as a gimmicky gadget guy. You can put him in the slot. Scotty Miller's a free agent, probably won't be back, so he'll be a good replacement. Tyreek Stevenson, cornerback out of Miami, to the Miami Dolphins. Byron Jones hinted at retirement kind of on Twitter this weekend. I don't know what he's going to do, but even so, Byron Jones hasn't been able to stay healthy. Xavier Howard has taken a step down with his play. So I think a guy like Tyree Stevenson, who's got some good size, good athleticism, and I think can produce right away, would be a nice fit for the Dolphins defense. The Seattle Seahawks select Mazie Smith, defensive tackle out of Michigan. He's your prototypical nose tackle, a guy who can stuff rushing lanes and make plays for the defensive linemen around him. I think he'll be a good fit within the Seattle defense. He's already added one pass rusher today with Tyree Wilson. The Chicago Bears select Michael Wilson, wide receiver out of Stanford. He dominated at the Senior Bowl, and another guy who I think is being slept on a little bit. 6'2", 209 pounds. He's a little bit older compared to some of these other receivers, but he's a guy who I think is going to end up being a really, really good pro, and Justin Fields is going to enjoy throwing the ball to him. Carl Brooks, edge rusher out of Bowling Green to the Los Angeles Chargers. They had another piece for their pass rush. Brooks has had 20 sacks within the last 2 years. 6'4", 300 pounds. He's got good athleticism. The production is also there, and I think he'll be a nice complement to the pass rushers they already have. With the 55th pick, the Detroit Lions select Darnell Washington, tight end out of Georgia. I think part of the reason why TJ Hawkinson didn't really work with this new offensive staff is to play tight end for the Lions, you have to be a really good blocker, and TJ Hawkinson just really isn't that. The Lions want physical guys up front who make plays with the run game, and I don't think there's any tight end who does that better in this year's draft class than Darnell Washington. He may not be the receiver that Dalton Kincaid or Michael Mayer or Luke Musgrave is, but he is a dominant blocker, and he's got great size, 6'7", 270 pounds. It's like you have another offensive lineman on the field, and he can make plays as a receiver as well, but I think what you're really looking for is a physical blocker, and I think within the Lions offense, he would be a perfect fit. So I think this would be a phenomenal draft for the Lions, getting Will Anderson and Deonte Banks in the first round, and then Jack Campbell and Darnell Washington in the second round. Hats off to Brad Holmes. Another phenomenal draft for Detroit. We've got our final trade of the day here at pick 56. The Philadelphia Eagles are moving up to get their new starting running back. They will acquire picks 56 and 185 from the Jacksonville Jaguars, who will be adding 62, 250, and a future fourth. The Eagles will be selecting Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA, another guy who's kind of being slept on because of how good Bijan Robinson is. Charbonnet is a perfect fit for this offense because he's a guy who's going to be able to be a bell cow running back right away. Miles Sanders is probably gone, as we saw with him getting like 3 touches in the Super Bowl. Kenny Gainwell's a good player. I like him a lot, but I don't think he can be an early down runner. You know who I think can? Zach Charbonnet, who'd be a perfect fit within this offense. I don't think the Eagles are going to use one of their first rounders on a running back. That's just not a Howie Roseman type thing to do, although there are some good running backs in that range, like Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. But I think Zach Charbonnet in the second round will be as good of value. Parker Washington, wide receiver out of Penn State, to the Giants. The Giants need guys who can get open and make plays with ball in their hands, and that's what Parker Washington can do. You can put him out in the slot, and I think he'll be very, very solid. The Dallas Cowboys select Trenton Simpson, linebacker out of Clemson. He's pretty raw, and he's got the physical tools to be really good. But we've seen a lot of athletic, raw linebackers over the last few seasons get drafted in the first round and really not pan out. So I think teams are going to be a little bit concerned with that with Trenton Simpson, and he could fall a little bit. But I think the ceiling with him is really high. He did have a pretty good season this year at Clemson, and I think the Dallas Cowboys, a team who is usually aggressive, is not going to be afraid to take a shot on him. The Buffalo Bills select Antonio Johnson, safety out of Texas A&M. This is a very good value pick. This kid should not fall to the 59th pick. You're going to be able to use him in so many different ways, whether it's in the box, in the slot, at safety. He's a versatile chess piece for your defense, and I think the Bills are really going to enjoy using him in a variety of different ways. Matthew Bergeron, offensive tackle of Cincinnati to the Bengals. This is a guy who's steady, reliable, pretty consistent. And I think that's what the Bengals should look to add to their offensive line rather than somebody who's tradesy and has a lot of upside. Get somebody who can be good, because that's what the Bengals need. The Carolina Panthers select Jordan Battle, safety out of Alabama, a 4-year starter within the Alabama secondary. This is a guy who's going to be able to produce right away for the Carolina defense. Could have been a first or second round pick had he declared for the draft last year, but he decided to stay in school. I think he'll be a good piece to add to the Panther defense. With the 62nd pick, the Jaguars select Kelee Ringo, cornerback out of Georgia. Ringo's another guy who was a super highly regarded recruit coming out of high school. The production was very inconsistent, and because of that, his stock is now starting to fall a little bit. He's got all the physical tools to be really good. If you look at him, 6'2", 210 pounds, one of the youngest players in the draft as well. He's just not consistent, and his lack of development really is not ideal. I think the Jaguars are equipped to develop him. When I was taking a look at their defense, making this mock draft, their defense across the board is really talented. And they've got a lot of young guys, including the secondary. They've turned Tyson Campbell into a star player. So now you add another former Georgia corner, and you hope to do the same. The final pick of the day here at 63, the Tennessee Titans select Andre Carter II, edge rusher out of Army. The Titans were able to move back with the Kansas City Chiefs and add a lot of picks, including Kansas City's second rounder next year. You add another piece to the pass rush with Carter, who I think can really fit the Mike Vrabel culture. Carter's been in a tough environment before, playing for Army. Discipline and consistency is really expected out of you there. And I think not to compare Mike Vrabel's culture to the Army, but there are some similar values that I could see carrying over in terms of consistency, discipline, toughness, physicality, all that stuff. So that's going to wrap up the episode here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. I'm going to have another mock draft out after the Combine. And again, the next podcast episode will be up pretty soon as well. So there's going to be a lot of exciting content here on this channel within the next couple of months leading up to the NFL Draft and beyond.